Before there were banks, before there were governments, before there were empires, there was a problem. A farmer had wheat. A fisherman had fish. The farmer needed fish. The fisherman needed wheat. Simple enough. They traded. Problem solved. But what happened when the farmer needed shoes and the shoemaker did not want wheat? What happened when the fisherman needed a doctor and the doctor had no use for fish? The entire system, the oldest economic system in human history, collapsed the moment two people wanted different things at the same time. Humanity needed something else, something that everyone would accept, something that could hold value across time, travel across distance, and speak a language every person on Earth could understand without translation. What they invented changed everything, and we have been living inside that invention ever since. The earliest forms of money were not coins. They were not paper. They were not digital entries on a server somewhere. They were objects. Ordinary objects, chosen by ordinary people. In ancient Mesopotamia, nearly 5,000 years ago, people used barley as currency. Grain was measured, stored, and exchanged as payment for labor, goods, and services. The world's first banks were not marble buildings with brass doors. They were grain warehouses, temples in many cases, where deposits were recorded on clay tablets by scribes who understood that writing down a number was just as real as holding the grain itself. This was the first great insight of money. Value does not have to be physical. Value only has to be agreed upon. From grain, humanity moved to something more portable, more durable, more universally desirable: metal. Around 600 BCE, in the kingdom of Lydia, a small but prosperous state in what is now Western Turkey, the world's first standardized coins were struck. They were made of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, and they bore the stamp of the Lydian king, Alyattes. That stamp was not decoration. It was a guarantee. It said, "This coin contains this much metal, and the power of this kingdom stands behind that claim." For the first time in history, a government had inserted itself between two people making an exchange. Money was no longer just an object people agreed to trust. It was an object a state had decided to make trustworthy. The difference between those two things is subtle. Because once a government controls what money is, it controls something far deeper than commerce. It controls the agreed-upon reality of an entire civilization. The idea spread with extraordinary speed. Greece adopted coinage and built an economy that funded philosophy, architecture, and empire. Rome took the concept further, minting coins across a territory stretching from Scotland to Syria, creating the ancient world's first truly unified monetary zone. The coin in a Roman soldier's hand in Britain was the same coin in a merchant's hand in Alexandria. Money had become a language, and Rome spoke it everywhere. But Rome also discovered something that every monetary system since has rediscovered, usually at great cost. When you control the money supply, the temptation to manipulate it is almost impossible to resist. As the empire stretched beyond its means, Roman emperors began doing something quiet and catastrophic. They started reducing the silver content of their coins, adding cheaper metals, making the coins physically smaller, but insisting they held the same value. The denarius, once nearly pure silver, had by the 3rd century AD become mostly bronze with a thin silver wash. Prices rose. Confidence collapsed. Soldiers demanded payment in grain rather than coin, because grain, at least, was real. The greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen was brought to its knees not by barbarian armies alone, but by its own debased currency. The money had stopped meaning what it said it meant. And when money loses meaning, everything built on top of it begins to shake. Paper money arrived from a direction most people in the West never expected: China. During the Tang dynasty, around the 7th century AD, Chinese merchants began depositing heavy copper coins with trusted agents and receiving paper receipts in return. These receipts, called flying money because they were so much lighter than what they represented, began circulating as currency themselves. By the Song dynasty, the government had formalized the system, issuing the world's first state-backed paper currency. It was a revolution so quiet that most of the world did not notice for centuries. Paper money meant that a government no longer needed to have the metal to back every transaction. It only needed to have the authority, the belief, the collective agreement that the paper was worth what it claimed. When Marco Polo returned to Europe from China in the 13th century and described a system where the emperor issued paper and merchants accepted it as readily as gold, his audiences thought he was exaggerating. The idea that paper could be money, that a government's promise could replace a metal's weight, seemed to European minds like a kind of madness. Within 4 centuries, Europe had adopted it entirely. The story of money is not really a story about objects at all. It is a story about trust. About the invisible social contract that says, I will accept this because I believe you will accept it too. And I believe you will accept it because someone powerful enough has told us both that we should. Every form of money in human history, barley, shells, silver coins, paper notes, digital entries, has derived its value from exactly the same source. Not from what it is, but from what enough people agree it is. This is both money's greatest strength and its deepest vulnerability. Because agreements can be broken. Beliefs can collapse. And when the trust that underlies a currency fails, as it has failed repeatedly across 5,000 years of monetary history, the consequences are never abstract. They are hunger, chaos, the collapse of the ordinary world that ordinary people built their lives around. We carry money every day without thinking about what we are actually carrying. A piece of paper, a number on a screen, an entry in a database maintained by an institution we will never visit, run by people we will never meet, operating under rules we were never asked to vote on. And yet we accept it. We work for it. We organize our lives around it. We measure our success by it. We lose sleep over it. Because somewhere, thousands of years ago, in a grain warehouse in Mesopotamia, or a mint in Lydia, or a government office in Song Dynasty China, someone made a decision. And that decision, repeated, refined, and reinforced across every civilization that followed, became the water we swim in, so familiar that we have forgotten it is wet. Money did not come from nature. It did not fall from the sky. It was invented by people for reasons. And the reasons have always mattered more than the money itself. If that thought stays with you longer than you expected, you are in the right place. Money Lens Media exists for exactly this kind of question. Because history does not repeat itself, but it always rhymes.